Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on Parenting Playbook here on Fox 8 CLE Plus. I'm Maureen Kyle, and this is a somewhat new show, but not a new concept. We do not get a manual when we get those babies or those kids, and wouldn't we love to just have a reference book at all times? Well, that's why we are creating this playbook with all of the wonderful experts that we have across Northeast Ohio. Now, if you were with us in the first episode, we had Dr. Lisa Ramirez, and we were talking about back to school, some of the anxieties that we start to see pop up. And she mentioned something that I had never heard in all my years of covering parenting topics and stories, that October is the hotbed of when parents start to make those calls to mental health professionals. I wanted to dive a little deeper into that because as a parent of 3, that made me a little worried. Like, should I be looking for signs? What do I do if I feel like my kid needs that extra help and I make that phone call? One of my favorite experts to call on in Northeast Ohio is Dr. Kimberly Bell with the Hanna Perkins Center for Child Development. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today and talking about this topic. I feel like we cannot talk enough about mental health.
We will never run out of things to talk about, you and I.
Yeah, right? I know. And you are one of the reasons why I started covering parenting so in depth, because I love all of your advice. Now, I want to talk about, we really started going in depth back when it was COVID.
Yeah.
And I feel like since 2020, there has been such a focus on mental health of our kids. Are we making sure that we're handling that correctly? I want to read a stat too, because a 2023 study said that 16% of adolescents aged 12 to 17 had been diagnosed, and that was a spike in a matter of just a few years. Mm-hmm. I want to get your take on that before we even go into everything else. Do you think that are our kids more anxious, or are we just recognizing signs and becoming more aware?
Yeah, I think both things are true. I think that we have seen an increase, not just with adolescents, but with all children. I don't think we could have predicted or could have known the impact of kids being home for a year and what that would do to their social functioning, their levels of social anxiety, just their level of comfort being out in the world. And the world is becoming a scarier place over time. And so we are seeing that. And in addition, we are looking for it, so we are catching it, which is a good thing. But sometimes good things make the numbers go up, maybe a little bit more. So I'm guessing there's some degree of error in there, as there are with all of those kinds of statistics.
I want to talk about anxiety as in age groups too. Mm-hmm. I have a first grader, I have a sixth grader. I have friends who have high schoolers. I feel like the word anxiety does get thrown out a lot, and it makes me wonder, am I missing something? If I see my child becoming anxious about a certain situation or a class or, being out on a playing field, I as a parent, I'm kind of going like, wait, does my child have anxiety and I'm missing it? So what would you say to parents out there who are hearing the word anxiety, hearing that more kids are being diagnosed and thinking like, is it my kid?
Okay, so first of all, let's throw out the word disorder. You didn't use it, but it's out there everywhere, right? Anxiety disorder. Let's get rid of that word because it's not helpful to us at this moment. And let's just talk about what anxiety is. Right? Anxiety is a part of everyday life. It is a part of all of us. We are born with our ability to respond to threats from the outside. If a bear is running at me, it's a good thing that I feel a little bit anxious and I want to run away. In modern society, that bear can be walking down the street by yourself in your neighborhood. It can be learning to drive a car. It can be separating from your parents. Any time where you are starting to be more alone with yourself in the world, that can be a trigger for a sense of danger. And our feelings of anxiety, the racing heart, the sweaty palms, that anxiety is nothing more than our body saying there's danger somewhere. And then we look around and we start labeling it. So it's not like, oh, well, you have anxiety, therefore it's a trouble. Sometimes anxiety is typical and it's normal and it's okay. Is it keeping you from doing the things that you love or that you need to do on a day-to-day basis? That's when we want to intervene on some level.
So the calls that you see as a professional, are most of them warranted? I mean, like I'm thinking, parents are kind of more, they're more quicker to call for help, which is a good thing.
Yes.
So are we, as a parent, are we a little bit more trigger happy when it comes to calling the doctor and going, I think something's wrong, I need my kid to be seen? Or do you think that it is good to talk through with all of these mental health professionals?
Yeah. Of course, I'm a mental health professional. I never mind getting a phone call. And I will do many things. Now, there is a difference. There's nothing wrong with going to your pediatrician. They're lovely people. But if you're not sure if it's a trouble or not a trouble, call a mental health professional who specializes in that. Because there are times where I can have a phone call with a parent, and just them telling me what's going on, I can say to them, let's maybe wait a couple of weeks, try saying this, see if that's helpful. Or I might say, are they interested in talking to somebody? And 9 times out of 10, parents have not even asked, especially even teenagers. They'll be like, oh, I didn't think to ask. I'm like, well, ask.
Yeah.
Because teenagers today are much more therapy savvy and are much more likely to say, yeah, I really do think I need to talk to somebody. And then it's there, especially as an adolescent. I start at about age 12, making sure that the child who's coming to see me wants to be there. And so there are a lot of things that can be done in between, and you can get that really through just a phone call to assess sort of the measure of need. But I would rather take a phone call from somebody that doesn't need me than for them to sit on it until there's a big trouble.
Yeah. Now, you said there are things to say to the child. A parent should be talking to the child. What are those things? Does it depend on the case, or can we have a general?
Well, we're going to get into that place of how well do you manage your own anxiety, right, as a parent. So I think the one thing that I would rather people not say is, oh, it's not that big a deal. Or, oh, when you get older, you're going to look back and this isn't going to matter. We can only say that with hindsight. So when a child is having something that they're worried about or afraid of, take it seriously. And that means validate. So if you validate, but then maybe you have some techniques of your own. Maybe you have a way that you manage anxiety. You know what really helps for me is sometimes I write down a plan, or I plan for how I'm going to manage it, or we can practice it in bearable bits, or there are a lot of those little bits of own personal advice that you can give to see if what your child needs is just for you to loan your resources to them in a new situation.
Is there an age group that works best for?
All of the age groups.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that will work for, this is how I deal with it.
Yep.
Interesting. So what are some of the signs we're looking out for, like even if a kid opens up and they're saying, yeah, I'm having trouble, this, but what are some of those other signs I think that we can never remind parents enough? Like, what are those signs?
So your teenager is more likely to tell you, use words. Elementary to early middle, they don't always know why they feel the way they feel. They just feel awkward. And so you're looking for things like removing themselves from social activities, not wanting to go, holding on a little bit tighter than they should to you, maybe out in public, or not wanting to go to sleepovers anymore. Any major change in behavior can tell you that something has changed with your child. Maybe you have a shy child and they've never been good at those things, and it doesn't become a worry until there's a lot more social pressure to do things that are uncomfortable. That's a time to get help usually.
I feel like we cannot just talk about anxiety without talking about depression, because depression was the second most diagnosed symptom among kids. 88.4% of kids reported suffering depression in 2023. When does it go hand in hand? Like when do you lump in, well, this is anxiety and depression?
So the younger the child, the more likely you are to see anxiety and irritability rather than what we would consider to be signs of depression. So in grown-ups, signs of depression are can't get out of bed, don't enjoy things the way that you used to, those kinds of things. But sometimes the irritability in young children is actually a signal for depression. And so I wouldn't put pressure on parents to try and self-diagnose before they seek help. right? The only thing parents have to be concerned about is there is a something that is getting in the way of my child's ability to thrive at school, in their social life, and in their self-esteem. Those are the things that are the most important to worry about. But you can see it, and it's not always helpful to label it.
What makes a kid more susceptible to any of this, but like especially depression?
Well, there are a lot of theories. I mean, there are some families where you can definitely see that there's a genetic component. Some people are more prone to expressing their discomfort through body, right? Migraines, those kinds of things. Some people tend to be more anxious. Intellectually gifted kids tend to be more anxious in general, like it's a little bit of a comorbid thing with that intellectual giftedness because they can think about things more than they have the emotional muscle to manage the things they can think about, right? So they're worrying about things that are so far beyond their current age capabilities that they can develop anxiety and depression. So you have to know your own family history. I think kids who are more, see, it's going to be interesting. Kids who are more introverted, meaning they prefer to be alone, those kids will have more social anxiety. But kids who are very extroverted can become very depressed if they're isolated, right? Like during COVID. So it really depends on the circumstance. Everybody has a weak point when it comes to how they manage the stress of life. Some kids go through active shooter drills as if it's nothing, and other kids develop school phobias. And until you see the child, it's kind of hard to say, oh, well, this is a kid who's at risk.
The adults who are in these kids' lives, so I'm going to lump in parents as well as caregivers and teachers. I feel like you and I may have talked about this before. I know that I've always heard that when you do start to see a kid isolating themselves or being isolated in a case of bullying or some of those social changes, which we all know, you know, first grade to high school, that social life is just, it changes dramatically. But do you think it's the isolation that people should be looking out for, or are there other signs?
Long term, I think isolation is a big, huge worry. Short term, any dramatic change in behavior from the child you know, right? And that's kind of a tough one. Let's talk just real quickly about the transition into adolescence, because we can have a stranger in our house, right? When adolescence hits, when puberty hits and the hormones start going and the changes start happening, all of a sudden you have a stranger living with you. That's a developmental struggle. And that can also be true, though. We can also help kids who have, if you want a diagnosis for it, it's called an adjustment disorder. It's when you're adjusting to a new thing and you're not doing a great job of it. They can get help for that too. And that can show up as depression or anxiety. But that might be a shorter term kind of piece of therapy versus somebody. Isolation in today's world, I think, is more dangerous than ever. If a kid loses interest in having friends, if a kid is turning down social opportunities, especially if a child is sinking into their technology and their online life feels more real than their reality-based life, that is a trouble. Get help now.
I want to talk more about that because I feel like between social media, AI, all of the technology that we are having. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, Dr. Kimberly Bell is going to go more in depth. I know even before we started recording, you said you have been like taking that deep dive into what's happening with kids. We'll talk about that when we come back. Welcome back to Parenting Playbook with Maureen Kyle. Today we are talking about some of those deeper mental health issues, the reasons why you should be calling a mental health professional, especially as you're seeing some of these things pop up in the fall. As we've been talking about, October is the hotbed of when we start to see a spike in calls to mental health professionals for kids. So this is a big issue for parents. And right before the break, Dr. Kimberly Bell with Hanna Perkins Center for Childhood Development was talking about technology, social media, the online life. This is big. I mean, luckily, I feel like over the past couple of months, if not year, we have really been talking a lot about social media and technology, and especially with the use of AI. But you said that is when kids start to take that life a little bit more seriously is when we start to see problems. If you can expand on that and explain.
Sure. And I don't want to vilify it because it's not going anywhere. It
No,
does
it's-
not help
no,
us.
we're all using it.
We're all using it. It's always there. But I think the thing that I've learned most recently that I'm giving a lot of consideration to is the pipeline that draws kids down into some of the things that are more dangerous on the internet. And that is that I think we all need to understand the impact of algorithms, right? So let's say you're playing a video game. And it's a video game your parents know about, but you go onto YouTube and you type in cheat codes for such and such a video game. And a video game comes up and it's an older person and they're playing a video game, and now you get into watching this person play the video game. And then it becomes the algorithm. So YouTube may say to you, oh, well, if you like this video, maybe you like this video. If you liked that video, maybe you like this podcast. And all of a sudden, you don't really know what your kids are watching, podcast-wise, message-wise, what they're hearing, because you just know they're playing this video game. And so it's another layer of necessary communication and awareness of what your kids are doing. And if they're saying to you, oh, well, I'm just playing this game, well, you need to start looking at what they're looking at on YouTube and being aware of some of those communities, because if they are socially awkward, if they do not make friends easily, then they are much more malleable, impressionable to some people who might want to take advantage of them in an online internet kind of environment. Or they may be very impressionable about the kinds of friends that they should have, or nobody understands you like we do. It's not great. And that's kind of the term that it moves towards what we call radicalization, right? That's a much deeper conversation. But for now, I think the most important thing is that parents really need to be aware of what's going on. And their kids aren't going to like it, and that's okay. I'm kind of okay with it.
So, I'm kind of picturing a stereotype of a kid that maybe has a few friends, but maybe not as social. But are other kids also susceptible? I'm just thinking like that is an age when, you're talking about a group that confidence is not at its all-time high. That's when everybody's kind of figuring out their confidence and self-esteem. So as a parent, what am I doing at home to make sure that my kid grows that self-esteem and that confidence so that they're not looking for it somewhere else, like online?
Being involved in real world activities. Not all kids are sporty kids, but there's coding camps for kids, leadership camps for kids. There's a lot of things in the real world where kids can find their people. I think especially, I work a lot with gifted kids, and those kids can feel like nobody their age quite understands them. And so they go seeking sometimes more mature conversation online and can be pulled into places without really realizing it. But there are places for kids like that if we just sort of pay attention. And I think I've said it I'm sure 100 times, but I haven't said it today, so I'll say it again. We have to do more listening. I think sometimes as parents we get into a zone where we want to fix, handle, and change. And so we're asking each other, we're calling professionals, and the first thing I always say is, well, what is your child saying about this? I'm like, oh, that's the person I forgot to talk to. Yeah. So communication, but also not communicating to problem solve, but to really listen, validate, empathize with where your kid is. Even if you feel overwhelmed because you don't really understand their social world as things change so rapidly, you can still listen and identify how they're feeling about it. And then you can sort of step back, think about it, come back and make a plan. Having that,
I feel like maybe you and I have talked about this before, but having that one special friend or something, is that what saves a lot of kids? And I'm not talking, as a mom, I want to be that person. I'm hoping that my kid comes to me and feels like I'm the person who gives them that validation. But I think we know that no matter what age, they need to have that one, even if it's one close friend. Is that correct?
Yes. So historically, studies have shown that kids who have one or two close friends are going to be okay in the real world. Let's make that a caveat there. You don't have to be the most popular kid in school. You need to have one or two good friends that make you feel like you have a village outside of your family, that you have some place to go as you begin to separate in adolescence from your family. And you are not kind of treading water in the world all by yourself. That loneliness is what leads to a lot of difficulties, because kids will grab onto whatever they can grab onto to get rid of that lonely feeling. And so, yes, you always want to be your kid's person, but honestly, sometimes it's like an uncle or an aunt or somebody who's not quite your mom or dad, because you're trying to separate in adolescence from them. And I put a lot of pressure on teachers. I talk to them a lot, I work with them a lot, and it's really important that teachers, like, I don't like teachers that tease or use or have mean fun with kids. It feels like they're on the same wavelength, but those kids often take the mean fun very personally. And teachers really need to send the message that every student in this class is right and perfect just the way you are. So that even that child who feels socially isolated has a teacher that sees them, as opposed to engaging in some of the more primitive stuff.
Is there an age where the social isolation begins?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I've seen it as early as first grade. As early as first grade, it really depends. I think, to kind of come full circle a little bit, the reason we see things happening in October, like you mentioned, at the beginning and coming out of the break, is because the school year started, and whatever new pressures are there, they usually show themselves by October. And so the teachers are complaining, the students are complaining, it's happening. It happens at transition phases. So kindergarten to first grade, we start to see increase in calls. Fourth grade, because the demands of the classroom to sit still tend to show the kids who are dealing with difficulties in that area. And then the transition from middle school and adolescence, because they're separating from their parents, and that's a very scary place. And so everything seems great over the summer, and then the pressure of school hits, and then our phones all start to ring in October.
I gotta ask, because it's interesting with my one of my kids. I was in talking to one of the teachers, and it was a casual conversation. There wasn't a major concern, but I said something like, "Oh well, friend group has changed." It was fifth grade, friend group change, and she goes, "Well, just brace yourself, because it's going to change again by seventh." And my kids are all in one building. They don't switch buildings. That's not the school situation we're in. So it's not like there's a whole new group of kids, but is that just because of maturity and what they're going through? Like first grade, then to fourth grade, there seems to be a different level of maturity. And then maybe seventh, is that those also?
Well, it depends. So if we're talking about puberty, the change, so from first grade through elementary, let's say you have kids who don't change classrooms. They're in that classroom all day long, for the most part, aside from specials. Well, they might not have the same group of kids first grade to second grade. And kids tend to hang out with kids based on proximity. And so your friend group can change. If none of your friends are in your class from first grade to second grade, then your friend group sort of changes a little bit. More kids today, because of play dates and things like that, tend to hang on, but maybe only one or two. And then the play group, then it shifts. And it happens more with girls than boys, because boys have more team sports at recess. It's an interesting thing to watch. Just go out on a playground and watch. Girls are engaged in activities that take one or two or three people, and boys will be like, everybody gonna go play football or something.
Yeah.
And so then we see that again when you have a locker situation in middle school. You tend to befriend people in a different way. Maybe somebody whose locker is next to yours, but you're changing classes all the time. And so your friend group tends to shift. And then who's going into puberty, who's not yet in puberty, who's interested in dating, who's not interested in dating. And so they tend to separate again based on level of social maturity and also potentially hobbies and interests. So the people you're spending time with changes a lot in middle school, and then high school, and things tend to kind of settle.
Oh my gosh. Well, before we wrap up here, if there is like one thing, I know there's a million things you probably want to say to parents, but if it's a parent who is wondering, should I call? Should I be worried? What kind of advice would you give, considering it's now October when this stream airs? What is that piece of advice that you would give to parents?
When in doubt, make a phone call. There is no reason to not call and ask a question. There really isn't. Nobody's judging you. Nobody's going to jump the gun in terms of bringing kids in for therapy. When in doubt, make the phone call and ask the questions.
And what about most schools do have a resource in a psychologist. Would that be a first step for most families, or is it the parent that needs to ask the question? Do you have a recommendation with
usually
that?
it's interesting because most school social workers or therapists or whoever they have on site keep a list of referrals to give to parents. We're on a bunch of referral lists for that because sometimes it's the teacher who talks to the counselor and the counselor who talks to the parent and says we think something's going on here. And, we'll offer them like a name or something if they want, to go someplace. So you can talk to them. If you have a concern, certainly you can call the school counselor and they can check in on your kid. So yeah, takes a village, right?
Right. I know, because I'm trying to process that through my mind. When you mentioned recess, I'm thinking, well, I'm never there for recess. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And I've heard of instances where it is the school, whatever resource, whether it's a social worker or counselor, is the one to call the kid in first. But then again, if I have a concern at home, I guess it is just sort of whoever notices the problem first and then wants to bring up the issue.
Yeah, as kids separate, they don't want you getting involved in their school life. But I worry about that. I would much rather a parent call the school counselor and say, hey, is everything going okay in this friend group?
Yeah.
Because sometimes the school counselor can still do that thing where they're like, why don't you guys come to my office for lunch?
Yeah.
And they work out, they problem solve. Sometimes they can resolve social disagreements that are causing people pain. And it's one step removed from a parent.
Yeah.
So use all the resources. Never be afraid to use all the resources.
I love it. All right, Dr. Kimberly Bell with Hanna Perkins Center, thank you so much. This was extremely insightful. I know I'm going to have you again because you are just a wealth of knowledge. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to Parenting Playbook here on Fox 8 CLE Plus. We're going to have new episodes every week, so make sure you tune in every week. We're going to have advice for you, whether it's how to run your family more efficiently, that's going to be coming up, or just how to raise healthy, happy kids. We'll see you right back here next week.